I get the wonderful task of introducing Christos and Christine from Scenic Arts Galanis. And believe it or not, they don't look old enough, but their father and mother painted and did the wall hanging on the right here, the Briggs Corner wall. And a few years ago, I had them come down here and said, hey, look at these, you know, could we do something with them? And we had a few holes here and there, and they were kind of faded, and, you know, they were somehow stuck to the wall. We weren't sure how. I think they were nails and a 1x2. But they came in, they looked at it, they said, yeah, we'll do something here. And through the resourcefulness of Victoria, they look brand new. And so they're going to give us a little history of these and their company. And we have like 4 generations of Galanises here because your son and daughter-in-law work with you, and your grandson's here too, right?
Yep.
So, wow, what a night. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming, and we certainly appreciate it. And, well, I don't do much in the presentation, but my boss does. And we've been together 50 years in this business, and I want to introduce the most perfect woman on the face of the earth.
Well,
So,
I have him here so he can mansplain what I don't do well, so you all can relate. So we're going to start off with Bessie Galanis. She is the Broadway angel of Scenic Art Studios. When she was 15 years old, she married Louis, who was then 23 years old, and he was working for Ben Craig. He was working for Ben Craig, and he was making
16.
He was making $16 a week, and she was making $90 a week. So she supported his dream. She supported what he wanted to do with the Scenic Arts and where he wanted to take it. And she's been through Scenic Arts the whole time, and she's the glue that held everything together, as most women are. And here we have a picture of a very young Louis Galanis. I couldn't find an older picture of Louis, but just look and it's kind of the same. And again, he was born in 1903 in Greece and died in 1977. He supplied, we have over 1,000 backdrops that he did, and he and Christos did the backdrops. This is his first official delivery car. It is it's a 1920s Trumbull bicycle tire car, and it says Christos Galanis Studios on it. And you notice in the back here is the gas tank on the car, and so. But he was quite proud of that car. You can tell by his face how proud he is.
You don't want to tell about the car?
Oh. Do you want me to?
Yeah.
Okay. This is the Trumbull bicycle tire car. Was on the Lusitania, and he was going to sell the gentleman was going to sell the cars in Europe, and he had 2 or 3 cars, and they were on the Lusitania, and the Lusitania, we all know, didn't make it to the other side, and his business went down with the Lusitania, and there were only a few of the cars left. And that's the history of that particular car. Has nothing to do with Scenic Arts, but there you go. And this is us. This is Christos and Christine Galanis. And Carlton, a couple of years ago, as he said, contacted us. We had just finished up the Foxborough restoration of their stage and their hall. Excuse me. The stage in their hall, and he called us, and we looked at it and said yes, and then disappeared for another 2 years until Victoria called us and said, hey, And we came down, and she was our taskmaster. The cruel woman she is. And scenic arts, we have worked with Symphony Hall. We have worked with the Boston Pops. We started Sarah Caldwell with the Boston Opera and Virginia Williams with the Boston Ballet. Scenic Arts was the first one that did the Boston Ballet, did the Nutcracker for the Boston Ballet. We did all the scenery for that particular. And next we have the 4 generations, handsome men that they are, the scenic men, and is Christos in the back, Nicholas, Joey, Michael, and little Jax. Now, little Jax has started painting. Michael, the one with the glasses, was the same age as Jax when he first started painting. And his father would give him a brush, and he would do the little bit of, he liked women's boobs, but he liked the swish of the, and it was funny when we were in Scenic Arts in Boston, we have a paint frame that runs the length, and we have one in the studio in East Bridgewater. And the backdrop fits into the paint frame, so you can stand on the same level and lower and rise the paint frame. And some scenic artists paint them on the ground. This is the European way of painting, up and down. And Louis would get so involved with painting in the studio in Boston that he would step into the hole, and he would go down with his cigar and his.
Keep going.
Okay, he would go down. He would go down with the cigar and the paint in one hand. The first time Michael ever painted, and in the studio, he walked up to the paint frame, walked right to the edge of the opening, and spilt his whole cart of paint. So I guess it was a scenic things, and it continued to this day. And we have next, we will not, as Abigail Adams said, remember the ladies. And the ladies have always been an integral part of Scenic Art Studios. We have my daughter.
They are here, I promise.
Yeah, we have my daughter, Denise, and my daughter-in-law, Denise, and Alicia. And their daughter, Lila, is in the theater arts. She's in dance theater. And our other granddaughter is now in painting in the theater in college. So it continues. And next we have everybody who has ever gone out to dinner or to breakfast or to lunch has sat down and seen a placemat and read the placemat of the people that sponsored this. The early 1900 version of this, 1935, were these advertising backdrops that you see today. And so now we're going to go on to the restoration of the Grange Hall curtain. We figured it was about 1935 that both of these paintings were done. This one here is the Briggs Corner Welfare Association, and George was telling me about it, was that they used to help families, and they used to sponsor shows, and they used to sponsor things at the Grange Hall. And this is Louis' signature, Scenic Art Studios, and that's how Foxborough contacted us, and that's how I think Carlton first saw. He saw the signature on the back of it. His backdrops have been found in Maine, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire, and there's one in Alton, Mass, that has been archived. When the backdrops deteriorate enough, they have to be archived when they can no longer be hung or they're no longer tolerant of the light.
This is on the back of this drop.
Now, when we took these backdrops down, we examined them, folded them very carefully, and put them in the car. And for a little over 7 months, they hung in the studio. And when something is there with you that long, you start to think of it as one of your kids, one of your children. And like all families with children, one of them is very troublesome, and one of them is very sweet. So This one here was our sweet, troublesome one. And same with the backdrop. So I'm going to start with the sweet one. This was Louie's backdrop, this backdrop here. Fabric repairs had to be made to the back of it, and we did that. We patched it, and then it was, and I had forgotten, but Christos told me that we had to sew on, I had to sew on the whole top of the drop. Webbing on the top of the drop, and also the pocket on the bottom of the drop, and because it had deteriorated to that point. And this is when it's getting ready for hanging. We're just seeing if this is going to work, if this is going to maintain itself on the weight of the backdrop. And now we were able to hang it, and it was for painting, for restoration after the repairs were made, and they were allowed to dry. And there's how we hang the backdrop in the studio, and it's weighted so it can taut out and get ready for painting. We also had to vacuum the drops because the paint had started flaking, and we had to be very careful with that. The next one is, you can see that one of the paintings needs to be restored down here, and then all the trees had to be freshened up. And this was the Briggs Corner, and if anybody recognizes or have stories about this hall, please share them. Please share them. We'd love to hear about the history. And this was that hall, that Briggs Corner Welfare Association, was established in 1923. And here is Mr. Galanis with his hat. Louis had a hat very similar, and he stands and paints, again, standing to refurbish the backdrop. And here it is, refurbished. Now, each block that you see on these paintings had to be, all the lettering was done freehand. So that was my job. I had to redo the lettering in freehand and make sure that it stayed with the integrity of what Louis intended.
Are those the actual fonts from the different companies?
No, they made up their own. Yeah, Louis hated lettering. Chris said he cursed the lettering out because it. Yeah. And here is Christos fooling around while moi is mixing paints for custom colors, and he decides to start taking selfies. We're going to get on to our very troublesome child, and that was the wood backdrop. When we first took it down, we noticed it was very, very heavy, and when we finally got it to the studio, we had to be very careful folding it. When we got it to the studio and we unfolded it, it was like Christos said that the paint they had mixed with glue, and it now had gelled and was kind of wet and goopity. And
Very difficult to sew.
yeah, and I have an industrial machine, and that I had to constantly buy special needles for it to get it through. And the backdrop, the bottom of the backdrop had rotted off. We almost were going to call Carlton and say, or Victoria, and say that we had to archive this.
Originally, they had drain pipes in the bottom pockets, and it was all stuck and glued inside.
That's mansplaining.
The product that was referred to as the Wood Brothers?
It's the Wood Brothers Springfield, Mass. studio.
Oh,
That's where it was done.
Oh, okay, thank you.
They were in business from about 1930 to 1936. So that's how we can age that backdrop too. And so the bottom, we had to cut the bottom of the backdrop off. We had to reinforce it. We had to sew it. Very, very difficult. You can see the top of the backdrop had been nailed to a board. So when we tried to take it out, it started deteriorating, and we had to web it too. We had to sew the web on that one too. Then the next one is we had to lay it out flat. We had to sew a brand new bottom onto it, and then it was ready for hanging. Then it was ready for hanging. You can see how wrinkled it is, and look at the edge, how the edge goes like this. It had to hang for about 2 months before we would even touch it, because the paint, it was flaking so badly and it was so wet. We knew that paint, we started it and it just didn't stick. And so we just backed off and let that troublesome child do its thing. And we can see that the warped nature, you can see at the bottom corner how warped that backdrop was getting, and the sides had to be reinforced, and we just had to wait. We had to look at it and wait for it. This is my favorite. Everybody has, Victoria and I were talking about this, everybody has a favorite. This is my favorite one. You furnish the bride and we'll furnish the home. And you'll notice that the background is a grayish, bluish grayish color, and we're going to come back to that in a couple of minutes. And this is what this side of the drop looked like. It had been eaten away, the fabric had started shattering, and we had to back it, and then we had to fill it, and then we had to paint it. And this is the scenery that we refurbished and we redid. And I'm going to stick my neck out here. I was talking to a couple of people. You know how restorers can look at a Rembrandt and they can, even though it's not signed, it just has that feel of a Rembrandt? Well, this picture is not a Rembrandt, but one of the scenic artists, the Wood Brothers, simply sold all the advertising. They didn't do any of the artwork. And there was a woman called Helen Tooker, and she was a scenic artist in Attleboro. She studied at the museum school, and then she moved to Taunton, and she had a studio in Taunton. There's only one other piece of her work that they think that she did, never signed her work, and I think that this is another one of hers. She moved to Tampa, Florida. She was a feisty woman, and she raised 5 children on her own, and when they tried to commit her to a nursing home, she fought it tooth and nail, and she kept saying that she was a famous artist, and she did scenery in Attleboro, and I think this is one of hers. She went to Tampa, Florida, and she did not do any more scenic art. She did small 1/6 portraits then, and she was a famous artist in Tampa. So if you want to look her up. Again, this is the Bliss Brothers. They make ice cream? Yeah. See, aha, it stuck a note here. Okay, yeah, everybody knows the Bliss Brothers, but you can see how deteriorated it is, how gray the background is. And again, the deterioration is quite obvious with this one. The backdrop is now starting, you can see a little bit, it's starting to taut up a bit, and then we had to work with it. This is me doing the lettering for the second time. The first time we did all the lettering on the backdrop, and then when I looked it up, one of the earmarks of the Wood Brothers backdrops was gold all around it, and all these blocks were blue. So we had to repaint them in blue. I had to do the painting first so that the calligraphy wouldn't be lost, and we had to paint it blue, and then we had to redo the calligraphy. I'm just going to say these are the people who supported all these blocks here. If you have any stories that you'd like to give about any of these businesses or anything that you know about these businesses, we'd be happy to listen to you and to share. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
What was his favorite subject to paint?
Flowers.
Flowers.
Oh, love flowers. We had
Flowers.
tons of flowers that we had. So,
Who made the text for each one of these? Did Louis get the text from the company, or did he write it?
From the
No.
company.
from the company.
That one is my favorite advertisement. If anyone can't read it, it says, "You
I
can
love
beat
it.
our cream, but you can't beat our milk."
Go ahead.
I was talking with another friend who said that some of these had some kind of an asbestos coating on them. and they were considered somewhat of a fire block.
We were just talking about asbestos curtains on a stage, that they were fire curtains, and they would drop in the case of a fire. And of course, asbestos is
The
in,
links on the curtains.
yeah,
I can remember taking them out. It's so dangerous to move an asbestos curtain.
Well, there would
And all the schools had them.
all our backdrops start at 16 feet high by 20 feet wide, and then we go up to there. And it's 32, 36, 40. It all depends on what anybody wants for backdrops. We do all the theaters in the United States, and we put together their shows for them because we have such an extensive inventory that we put together their shows for them, ship the backdrops out, and then bring it back. And surprisingly enough, I can only think of 50 years, maybe one or two, that somebody destroyed a backdrop. But they're very, very careful with them. And there is Finis at last. Look up, then to your left, and up here. And we're very proud. And thank you so much for everything, everybody that supported us and just supporting us to be here. We appreciate it. Thank you.